Joining me now is white-collar criminal defense attorney Sara Azari. Sara, it's always so nice to see you. Keeping in mind the latest reporting that the DOJ won't be indicting Trump anytime before the November midterms, do you think we could reasonably expect an indictment of Donald Trump?
Look, Katie, if this was one of my clients, I'd be having a conversation with them about what will happen when you're indicted, not if you're indicted. I would be speaking to prosecutors in the Southern District of Florida and D.C. about how we can help you help us. What do we do about bond? What do we do about the initial hearing? But this is, of course, a former president who's gotten a lot of deference. When he was sitting president, he got deference with respect to the Mueller investigation crimes. Then he got cut slack with Ukraine. Then, January 6th, there's all this struggle with intent and knowledge. And now we have the issue of, well, it's unprecedented and he's a former president. But, when you look at whether or not he's going to be indicted, Katie, you really have to look at what it's like to be in Garland's shoes. Garland has to make sure that he can check off all the boxes and has sufficient proof beyond a reasonable doubt, because we're in a court of law. It's about, we know what you show, right? And so he has to be able to feel confident that he can prove every element of every one of these offenses. And I'll tell you something, as someone who's defended people on obstruction charges and violations of the Espionage Act, typically the government does not prosecute, the DOJ does not prosecute just on Espionage Act violations alone, unless obviously they're very egregious, but that sort of a mishandling of classified information type of charge. If, however, it is in combination and aggravated by an obstruction charge or something more egregious, like what we're starting to see with Trump and his orbit, then that is a very serious consideration for indictment. And so here we have a president who, with respect to knowledge, not only the DOJ has witnesses that it has alluded to in the unredacted portions of the affidavit and then the recent filing, but Trump and his lawyers have been filling in the blanks. Essentially his lawyer's been putting herself at the crime scene, making herself a witness, incriminating her client. Her client, Trump, is on Truth Social admitting to knowing that he was in possession of these documents because they were in cartons and they were not in the way that the FBI displayed them for the evidence photograph. So, to the extent that there's any dots to be connected or any blanks to be filled, Donald Trump and a group of very incompetent, I'm sorry I have to say that, law school graduates for the past several weeks have been doing the job of DOJ, helping in this investigation. So, he is indictable. He is indictable, but for the fact that we have these policy and political considerations of dealing with a former president.
Yeah, but the lawyers here, right? We've all been talking about their personal exposure based upon their own independent conduct that they did vis-a-vis the federal government, the FBI, in the investigation. Notably, Christina Bobb not signing off on any of the filings that are being done in court. You see Lindsay Halligan, you see Jim Trusty. I mean, the people that you see signing off on these documents, Sara, they are not people that we've been talking about having exposure themselves criminally in this particular investigation. Do you think they've lawyered up people like Christina Bobb? Do you think that they've actually gone and gotten their own counsel out of a fear that they could be a co-defendant in a subsequent indictment with Donald Trump?
Yeah, Katie, I see this as a multi-defendant type of indictment if it's brought at some point, hopefully. But if she has not lawyered up, she should be lawyering up. And so should Ms. Haba, who was on TV talking about being in that room and the documents not ever looking like that. I mean, she's at a minimum a witness, and she needs witness counsel. A witness, as we know, can turn into a subject, and a subject can turn into a target very easily. So all of these lawyers need their own lawyers, which is part comical and part really astonishing to me. But they have put themselves in a situation where not only they have not controlled their client to the extent that he's controllable, he's out there talking and he's digging a deeper hole for himself, but they are digging holes for themselves as co-defendants. They have signed off on affidavits about, knowing, having personal knowledge about these documents and how they're stored and where they're stored, that there's nothing else left, that they've turned everything over. And of course that is not true. And the DOJ is aware of that because in their recent filing, they clearly laid out that there's been some concealment going on by not only Donald Trump, but people around him. And those people around him are his lawyers.
Well, I think when it comes to proving intent, Sara, the fact that there's this much obstruction going on, not only by Donald Trump, but his lawyers, I think very quickly soon Trump's going to be calling that whole crew of lawyers the Covfefe lawyers that he had. Sara Azari, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Good to be with you, Katie.